Thanks for checking out Bloodline Art Studios podcast. And today we're going to be talking about my boarding school era paintings. First off, I don't want to get too much in on how I started painting. That'll be for another episode. But this first image here that we're going to talk about is one of my earliest paintings. And in fact, it's the first actual painting that I sold. So it's like an important painting to me. So this is first off, this is a watercolor painting. When I first started painting a few years ago, I've done art my whole life, but I didn't start painting until maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. And I started off with watercolor. This is one of my first watercolor paintings. And what I wanted to represent, what's really important to me is using my art as a way to raise awareness and a way to tell a story of things that I connect with. Because of the things that I went through as a child, I kind of see life through like a different lens. Some people say, I'm a dark person, or you see things negatively. That's not really so much the case. But what I connect with is suffering, and it's kind of a weird thing to say. But I just really like to bring awareness on things that affect not so much myself, but things that affect things that I care about. And what do I care about? I care about culture, and I care about like children's awareness as far as like child abuse, and I also care about depression, right? So those are the things that affect me daily, that I struggle with daily. So when I talk about culture, the Native American culture, not so much my bloodline's culture, meaning Choctaw blood. So I'm out here in California, right? And thankfully, there's a local, the local people out here really helped me out when I was like 13 or 14. And I was invited to a sweat ceremony, and it was really eye-opening. It really changed the direction of my life, being around those people and praying with those people. And shout out to Trap out there on the Thule Res. It really did change my life in the direction of just being hopeful of life. At that time I was struggling with depression. I was struggling with just life in general, and being able to pray with those people out there, and just being able to be around a community with the same goal. That goal is to, at that time, is to hold that ceremony. And what I mean is, everybody has a purpose, right? You have the people cooking, the people tending the fire. You have everything there. Everybody had a purpose, and everybody worked together to achieve what they're there to achieve. And I'll never forget when I first went in there, just the feeling, the connection. I made that connection that day. So forever, in my heart, I give thanks to the elders out there at Thule, and for crediting them on changing the direction of my life. And so that's where the love of just Native American culture, the pride of being Choctaw, and just giving credit or giving praise to to that connection I made that day. So that's something that I've carried with me through my life. It's just the appreciation of those prayers and the appreciation of that connection you make. So when I started doing art, that's what I wanted to explain to people through my art. I'm not just out here painting, scenery or the mountains or, when I paint, I want to be an expression of myself. I want to explain to people. I want it to be impactful, and I want to honor the struggles that Native Americans went through. And a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't even know about the whole boarding school era. So when I first started painting, I thought that would be a good subject to bring up, and it's also a way for me to heal. Art is therapy. When you express yourself through art, it really is a release. Some people go to the gym, some people read, some people write poetry, some people go for walks, some people exercise, some people play sports. For me, art is my escape and a way to express myself. Even so much so, later on in therapy, I found out that how art is even used for children. So a lot of times kids can't really express themselves because of dramatic things that they're going through. So a lot of times when children are taken out of situations, it's almost impossible for them to explain what they went through. So a lot of times they're just given a piece of paper and some pencils and some crayons, and that's how they start their conversation. This is how early therapy. This is just one tool to help children express themselves. And there's examples out there of children who could not physically speak their trauma, but they can put it to paper, and they can put it to explain their hurt and explain their trauma through art. And it's a release, just like with anything. If you keep something built up inside, you need to release that energy, and for children, it's a lot easier for them to release that negative energy. It's easier for them to release it through art. And the same goes for me. It's easier for me to talk through my art. I'm not a real social person. So for me, expressing my thoughts or expressing my appreciation for culture or expressing just anything, I want to do it through my art. So when I first started painting, I really wanted to express the trauma and the hurt that my ancestors went through, and so many of you natives out there, what your ancestors went through, and maybe they didn't close these residential schools until recently. So let's talk about that. I don't want to talk about facts and statistics, but just in general, okay. If you saw my last podcast and it talked about domestic violence, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, there was a time when the U.S. policy for Native Americans was the only good Indian is a dead Indian. Well, that switched after the last treaty was made and the so-called end of the Indian Wars. And then, so they wanted to assimilate natives to European culture or American culture. So then they took up the policy is, kill the Indian, save the man, which means kill the identity or the culture of indigenous peoples, and that's how they're going to save natives. And they went pretty hard on it. Obviously, with there was a lot of mistakes and a lot of horrible atrocities that came out of this. And just like with anything in wartime or with people who are dealing So a lot of these schools were, boarding schools are ran by the church. And the abuse that happened in these schools was just ridiculous if you think about it. These children were taken from these homes at a very young age. In most instances, they were forcibly removed from their homes. And what does this do to families, right? So in Native culture, community and family is everything. I mean, it literally is everything. Community and family. So we have a whole generation in the early 1900s of these families being taken apart, right? So, like, what I like to explain people is, they took the land, they took the culture, but our hearts didn't break until they took the children. And in this era is when that stereotype of the drunken Indian came about. Why is that? Because we're human beings, and if you steal someone's children without your say so, what is that going to do to you? And I'm talking on the parents aspect. And even in Oklahoma, they would actually give out bottles of whiskey to per treaty rights. Okay, so I don't want to get into how treaty rights works, but there was actually state-funded alcohol given to Native American families. Why did they do that? They wanted to keep them down. That's a way to control the people, right? Even so, policies in the United States today, in impoverished neighborhoods. So that's one way they did that. So what happened in that era or generation? So this goes for my family too. You get that first generation alcoholic, right? He don't know how to express himself. His kids are gone. There's alcohol accessible. You don't know how to express yourself. You don't know how to deal with pain. You don't know how to cope. And like a lot of people struggle today, if you have this pain, if you have this guilt, a lot of people turn to drugs and alcohol. And that's why I really express sober living today. I have it all in my family, and it's a bad thing. And it controls and it destroys so many families. So this generation, when the kids were stolen, and a lot of the times these kids would run away back home, right? They didn't want to be there. So they would forcibly or intentionally ship them off to a school that was far away, right? Really far away, hundreds of miles, different states. And they did that intentionally so the kids would not try to run away. And a lot of the time that these young kids would still try to run away home, right? And they were never heard from again. I'm talking a lot of lives. So that also accompanies why these native parents, these native dads, native moms would turn to alcohol, right? You couldn't pray, right? Our culture was taken away. It was against the law to practice your ceremonies. And when I say ceremonies, to translate to American culture, that's just how we pray. That's how we give thanks. That's how we keep our connection to the Creator. And all that was taken away. We couldn't do it. It literally was illegal until 1978 for Native Americans to pray the way they wanted to pray. So even in Choctaw, in Oklahoma at those times, they took away everything. We had, our stickball. We couldn't play our games that were given to us by the Creator. All these things were taken from us. The stomp dances were definitely taken from the Choctaw. The Christians thought it was whatever they thought, but we couldn't do it no more. So all these things were taken away, right? And then now they're taking away the kids. Now they're taking away your blood. And what are these parents supposed to do? And I make that connection with them, and I can feel for them. You know, I pray for their the ancestors, man. Just, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine not being able to pray. You take away all community-based prayer, right? So all ceremonies, all that is taken away. The games are taken away. The gatherings are taken away. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't leave the reservation. And then on top of that, we're going to give you alcohol, and that helps you numb the pain. And then on top of that, we're going to take your kids. That generation set back Native families to this day, just because it's hard to dig out of that hole, you know. So back to this generation, that's when a lot of families, or a lot of dads, or a lot of moms, that's when they turn to alcohol, just because they didn't know how to cope. And as many of you know, when you grow up in a household where alcohol, with an alcoholic, or someone who's addicted to drugs, the percentages of you becoming an alcoholic drastically rise, right? I mean, just because everything is learned as a child. And if you're sitting there watching your parents get drunk and not do things with you, or that stuff is passed down. It literally is, man. If you let it know that it's okay to do these things. And then that's not to top it off to the trauma that happens when you drink alcohol, and that's for another episode. You know, I'm real passionate about that also. So all these things I want to talk about, right? I want to talk about these things with people who maybe they went through it, maybe they never heard about it, maybe they're non-natives, they never heard about it. Just because this is history that's not in in history books. You don't learn this in school. And a lot of people don't understand it. All they see is the Native American from the movies, and the Native Americans as mascots. You know, that's all they see. That's all they get. They get the Native Americans from Dances with Wolves, and that's what they want to see. You know, they want to see us, you know, talking to animals and running around on the prairie. You know, they don't want to see us as equals, as human beings. So that's what I want to talk about. These real issues that are hard to talk about. So how am I going to talk about that? I'm going to talk about that through my art. So this first painting here, what is it showing? It's showing obviously a child who is going through a dramatic experience, right? And a lot of times when they took these children, they would round them up, and the first thing they do is cut her hair, right? They, right off the bat, they want to crush that identity of the Native American. So what they would do is they would cut their hair first. They'd get them in line. They'd throw lime on them. And then they would just chop their hair off. And now there's not an overall belief in Native cultures, and that's another stereotype. You know, we're all different cultures. We're all different beliefs. There's like over 500 tribes in the United States alone. But an overall general thinking of hair is just a connection of your being, right? I don't want to get too into it. But that's the identity of most Native Americans. And so they would stomp that out right off the bat, right? And these are just young kids. They don't know what's going on. All they know is their mom and dad. They've lived with their mom and dad, and then all of a sudden they're taken away and they don't see them no more. In a dramatic fashion. A lot of time it's dramatic, you know. These people would go in and forcibly remove these kids from their homes, get them on a bus, and then all of a sudden they're all alone, right? That's horrible. Think about that. That is horrible. What does that do to their mental being? and then they tell them they can't speak their language, right? They tell them that they have to pray a certain way. If they speak their language, they get beaten. If they do this, they get punished. And there's numerous accounts of sexual abuse. So much pain in that time of history. And how I explain it to people is that's the most impactful part of Native American history in the Americas, or with the United States. Just because that affected the next 4 to 5 generations until we break that cycle. Some people, we haven't broke it yet. Some of us have. And it's a horrible cycle to break, right? You know, your great grandparents was an alcoholic, or let's say the children, right? They go through this, they go through the sexual abuse, or if they didn't get sexually abused, they go through, being punished for speaking your language, and then they go back to the res, and they have to be ashamed of being Native, right? Because that's what was forcibly enforced on them. You know, you can't be Native, you can't speak your language, you can't pray no more. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do that. You know, we're going to kill the Indian in you. You know, we're saving you. So then you have this identity crisis. And this is, in the 20s, 30s. So then these people have kids. And this is where that cycle started. You know, a lot of people turn to alcohol. And like I said earlier, when you raise kids with alcohol, your kids are more than likely turn to that as a coping mechanism as they grow up. So we're still fighting that in our communities today. But I want to share this, I want people to really understand what it was like for the ancestors to go through that. And a lot of times people don't do that. People have the ability to do it, but they just don't want to. I mean, really put yourself in those shoes. Make that connection. Pray to them. And really put yourself in that situation. Just sit back and imagine it. And pray for them. That's what I do, if you just really think about that, it's heartbreaking. And these paintings are hard to paint, man. I'm sitting there looking at a child. For instance, this painting of just tears in his eyes, and his braid is about to be cut, and then his braid is the sacred colors of the medicine wheel. Once again, that's not a belief throughout Turtle Island, but there's similarities drawn between all of our cultures. So that's why I put the colors there, to symbolize not just his hair about to be cut, but to symbolize the 4 colors as a culture and their beliefs. And then the blood on his hands, because there's blood on these people's hands. These kids died. A lot of them died. Their parents became alcoholics. A lot of them died. A lot of families, man. This is where a lot of families took a turn to the bad. Before this era, you were proud of who you were. You had your prayers. You had your people. And then they stole these children and instilled, and it made them ashamed, Thankfully, we got past that. But, in a lot of communities, we still struggle with it. And then this painting, actually, I started having therapy like 5 years ago. And then people from the community encouraged me to show my work. So I had my first art show with at Fresno State with James Luna, and I didn't know what to think, man. I never show my art. I've done art my whole life. I haven't done painting. So at this time, I was maybe painting for like 6 or 7 months, and the response was amazing. A lot of people, this painting affected a lot of people when they saw it. And you can just see it, man. You can see the hurt in people's eyes. Like automatically they make that connection because their ancestors went through it. And so when they look at this, they see their great grandpa, you know. And maybe they can make that connection. Some people make it easier than others, but you can, you can see your great grandpa as a child getting his hair cut. And for a lot of natives, man, I'm talking almost all of them, man, this is their ancestors. This happened to them. This is not just a few ancestors or a few tribes here and there. Nah, man, this is across the United States. This was a lot of natives. So this is someone's great grandpa right here. So when people would come and look at this painting, I seen a couple people cry. Then I would start crying with them, and that show really changed me, man. I was like, oh man, you know what? I got to do this full time, man. Like, I really being able to share that and open these conversations up was really impactful for me. And then I sold this painting that day. Someone came up and offered me some money for this and another painting, and then some of my other paintings, and I sold them. And the idea that somebody would pay money for just a piece of me, right? All my paintings are a piece of me. The idea that somebody would want to pay money for me expressing myself on paper just blew my mind, man. I was like, whoa, that's just crazy. Just because my paintings are so personal, it's not me learning a skill. It's not me going to school and learning how to paint and then going and painting a picture of Yosemite. That's not what kind of artist I am. I'm self-taught, and everything is through emotion. Everything is through prayer. I treat my paintings as if, in most Native people, when they work with their art, or they doing beadwork, or they're a basket maker, or so each bead, each strand of river cane for Choctaw baskets, or they're all made with prayer. You pray for the person who's going to receive that gift, or for the person who is going to become the caretaker of that object. So you put prayers in them. That's how I am with my paintings. And some people think it's crazy, like, what's this guy talking about? That's who I am, man. It's important to me, and that's the connection I made up at Thule. Like, I really made that connection, man. Like, and I still carry it with me today. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful ever since that day, man, like, for saving me. So I put prayers with my paintings, man. And hopefully they find the right person, right? So when people buy my paintings, obviously they like it, but it's not just something to hang on a wall. It talks to them. It tells a story of maybe their grandparents, or maybe their ancestor, or it tells a story of just maybe their kids, or just happiness. Like if I paint a young child in regalia dancing, that's happiness, and that's the beautiful thing about art, man, is it can be painful, but it also can be joyful. And that's like, a lot of people are like, oh my God, these paintings are so hard to look at. They are. Yeah, they are. They are hard to look at. They were hard to paint. But guess what? They're survival, right? If you're standing there and you can see your great grandpa in these pictures, guess what? You're a survivor. You went through it. You survived. So there's an appreciation with it. Just like when you're so in my family, my grandpa was in World War II and was a highly decorated soldier. My family's proud of that. We were proud of what the sacrifice he made and what he went through. It changed him as a human being. So there's an appreciation for it. Same with these children, right? There's an appreciation that they went through that and they survived. And then that's why you're here walking. Now, there's also an appreciation for the ones that didn't, the ones that crossed over. And that's one thing about Native culture, and I'm sure all cultures, not just Native Pacific, but we really show appreciation for the ancestors, people who's crossed over. So when you look at this painting, it's an appreciation of just your ancestors, your survival, and for the ones who crossed over, because we need to talk about them also. We need to bring them up. We just like the warriors that died in battle or in all these wars that for sacrifice. It wasn't their fault, man, why they were taken. And whether they died of disease, whether they died of trying to escape, whether they died of abuse, and I don't want to get too detailed in the abuse, man, just because there's some stories, first-hand accounts out there that'll just break your heart, and so I don't want to get too deep into that. But we're gonna switch here paintings here. This one here, it's like a mother's love, right? So these yellow paintings that I did, I was asked to do an exhibit for a Minnesota boarding school era show. And I really wanted to show, because it's not just them that went through it, right? Obviously, I need to reword that. Obviously, it's them that went through the physical pain of it, but there's also pain associated with the parents of losing their children, and that's a pain that no parent should ever go through. Like, no parent should have to bury their children, and a lot of times these parents were never seen their children again. A lot of times these kids were taken 300 or 400 miles away, and who's gonna, so summer vacation, school vacation, there's all kinds of stories about that. Who's gonna take these kids back? You think the U.S. Government is gonna pay for that, to send all these kids back just to go see their parents for a couple of weeks? Nope. No, that's not happening. So it was up to the parents if they wanted to see the children. Where are they gonna get that money? As many as these kids were taking, they were taken from poor families. They don't have money to go see their kids in Oklahoma when they're from North Dakota. What? That's not happening. Can you imagine the pain that these parents went through? Not knowing if your kid is okay, not being able to hug your children, not knowing if your kid is dead. We're talking years and years of just not seeing your children. They don't get to go back home. Nobody's paying for that. So a lot of times they were never seen again, and that's the name of this painting. This mother is holding his baby, her baby, and for the last time. A lot of times it was for the last time, and a lot of time it was forcibly removed from homes. Like, there's stories of children hiding underneath houses because they were there to grab these kids from their homes. And so we can't forget, we cannot forget these ancestors. We cannot forget their pain. You pray for their pain, and that's why I painted this. So a lot of times in my studio, I would get a lot of probably 99% of the people who would show up to my studio during shows were non-native. and that's fine. That's great, you know. But none of them, I mean, none of them knew that this stuff went on, and that's crazy to talk about, right? So we have all these museums for World War, like Holocaust survivors. In Fresno, they just did one. You got the Hmong, the Armenian, and we should honor all of those people, absolutely, 100%. But we are on native land, and there is nothing out there that says in any way that these things went on. There's no museum to honor these children. Well, that's crazy to me. But then again, if you think about it, it makes sense. You have to rewrite the history that puts you in the light, and that's what happened. So that's why I want to talk about this stuff. Hopefully this podcast can reach out to some non-natives, and maybe they'll have a little more appreciation for Native Americans. There's a lot of racism, especially like in the Dakotas, and not so much California, just because it's more of a diverse state, so we don't really see it as much. Just an example of even racism here in California. When I was my first day of school, I was so happy to go to school, and man, I was just ecstatic. I couldn't wait to go to school. My first day of school, these kids weren't playing with me. I couldn't make no friends, and they told me they don't play with dirty Mexicans. And it's a family joke now. We laugh about it. I didn't know what a Mexican was. What's a Mexican? I guess I'm Mexican, right? They don't want to play with me because I'm Mexican. I literally never heard the word in my life. I didn't even know what that was. So when I get out of school, I go home and I'm crying. I didn't make no friends, and I asked my mom why she made me a Mexican, just because I didn't know what that was. And she explained it to me, and it's funny now. We laugh at it, but that was my first example of just racism in California. It's racism toward Mexicans, not so much Native Americans like it is in the Dakotas and maybe Oklahoma, some of the other states. But racism sucks, man. Don't get me on that, especially with this political shit that's going on. So that's this painting. So here's another painting of some. This was from an actual photograph of baby handcuffs or toddler handcuffs, and this is from an actual photograph. And these handcuffs were used to punish or to lock up Native American children. That's sick. That's sick. Yeah, I don't even really want to talk about that one anymore. Let's move on. Okay, so this is one of my most paintings that I'm most proud of. The way it came together, it just was so easy. Like, to have the idea, and it tells a lot, right? It's just, you got the never forget, you got the scissors again with the hair, and again with the medicine wheel colors, and then with the blood on the shoulders and on the hands, and the coloring. So my whole life I was a graphite artist, just pencil and paper, man, and I was so obsessed with detail, of just getting everything the most realistic that I can get it. And when I started painting, I like, my favorite artists out there are really super loose portrait artists, where you really can't even see what's going on. It's just because that's so interesting to me. rather than like, we're not painting photographs. That's what a photograph is, so I try to make my paintings more interesting as far as substituting colors with different colors, trying to bring out different emotions through color, and just that's why everything is just kind of this, earth tones or this yellows, browns, and the main focus is his braid dead center and that never forget. That's where I wanted to make the focus part of the painting, and it came together perfect. I used this painting as an example of just if I'm going to show somebody a painting that's important to me, I'm going to show them this painting, just because it tells a story of what we're talking about here, and it makes people look. It draws people's attention to it. This painting was another painting that was painted for that show in Minnesota, and I'm really proud of this painting. Again, for the same reasons, Let's move on to the next here. And I can't say enough of this next painting here. Just because this affects me right now. Okay, so you got your English only on the mouth. These little children were beaten for speaking their native language. Okay, so what I struggle with right now is trying to learn Choctaw. So Choctaw Numpa, I wasn't raised around it, right? The first Choctaw words, I remember, like saying I love you and halito, and it's from my Uncle Gene. Started bringing these words around when I was like around 13, 14, and we lost it. We lost the language somewhere down the line. For a lot of Choctaws, once we made the Trail of Tears and we were trying to settle in Oklahoma, it was just a lot easier to learn English. Much like, Mexican immigrants that come here today, which are all welcome here. A lot of times they learn English and their kids will only learn English. Not in all families, but a lot of families. They're just going to learn English because they're in America, and that's the common language, right? So that was kind of the same example of Choctaw in Oklahoma in the early years of settling our new reservation there, right? So there was a lot of language lost just through daily life, and then there was forcible language lost, which is through boarding school. And it sucks, man, because I'm trying to regain that now. We have a group of Choctaws out here in California, and we have a language class, and then through the nation, they're trying to do as much as they can. They have their daily emails of words of the day, trying to relearn these languages, and they're really trying to promote it, which is great. But I have a hard enough time speaking English, I was horrible in school. So if you can only imagine trying to learn another language, man, it's hard for me. And a lot of times, so what I tell people are even, so I do these paint classes with youth, and a lot of times that's one thing I'll say is if anything, just learn a little prayer in your language, right? And a lot of times people are like, oh, I want to connect with my ancestors. I want to people who are so disconnected from their culture, they're like, oh, I really want to learn about, what my ancestors did. And there's a lot of us, right? Because the boarding school era, that's the reason why we painted this. A lot of that was stolen, right? It was beaten out of you, and you were ashamed of it, and we're recovering from that now, and that started with, the early days of AIM, of making people proud of being Native again. So we're trying to relearn this stuff, right? And it's hard, So I just tell people, learn a prayer in your language. If you want to connect to your ancestors, don't go out and try to do this and that and think you have to go to a sweat ceremony, which is great, or think you have to live on a res, or start off slow here and just, how about let's just learn some prayers in your language. And the reason why I say that is because I'm a person of prayer, and I honor my ancestors. But learn to speak in your ancestors' tongue. I mean, isn't that the greatest way to honor them, or one of the pray for them, and then pray for them in their native tongue, in the language that was gifted to them but from the Creator, that they've been speaking for thousands of years. Talk to them in their language. That would be amazing. So that's what I tell people. And it's a start, right? You can, even just by saying hello in your language. And because there's a lot of tribes out here that we're losing it, right? There's very few very few fluent language speakers in all these tribes in the United States. Even Choctaw, we have a lot of we're a bigger tribe, but even our language is in danger, and it's a sad thing if your ancestors aren't going to be able to hear you, sing them songs. We have our songs still, but we need to. It's good. It's energy for your soul. Let me tell you that. If you learn just a couple words in your language, and you say it, it's energy for your soul, and it will do you good. I promise you. So go out and do that. I challenge you guys to do that. A beautiful thing. And so that's what this painting was for. And of course, with the immigration things that started happening at the border, I'd really share this picture just because of the atrocities that's going on with the kids in cages and all that stuff. Yeah, man. So if you can, try to learn your language, man. Find a group. There's group chats. There's people out there. There's elders out there, man, that are doing their hardest to share their knowledge, but for whatever reason, sometimes they're hard to find, and but they're out there. You have to find them yourself. Luckily, that there was some elders there's elders out there that are looking for people in need, right? And they're out there, man, and they're beautiful people, and they're super important to your tribe, and they're super important to the youth, because they're out there spending time with youth when their parents are maybe struggling with addiction, or they're bringing these youth to ceremony, and they're teaching them songs and dances, and we thank you for that, man. We thank our elders, and we honor our elders. This next painting here, it's a never forget one, and it's basically a child who's holding his braid because he doesn't want to let it go, right? So this is a struggle that some of these children had. They didn't want to let go their creator, their language. So he's at a school desk, and he's holding a feather, and he's holding his braid, and his head's down, right? It's one of my most powerful pieces, just because you can just, I challenge you guys to just put yourself in their shoes. Like, I know that's That's hard for some people to do. But if you're able to do that, like myself, man, I can feel for them. Like, I put myself in his shoes, and I can feel his pain, and I pray for him. You know, this is your great grandpa right here, struggling. You know, your great grandpa was praying to his ancestors. You know, we're all connected, right? He was praying for strength just because his identity was taken. You know, maybe he was beaten before this picture. Maybe he's crying. Maybe he's praying. Maybe, you know, that's for you to interpret. But he's doing his hardest to hold on to his culture, right? He's holding on to that braid, the identity. He's holding on to that feather, that sacred feather, you know, that maybe he earned or was given to him or passed down to him. So he's holding on to that. And these are our elders now, trying to pass down these languages. So, you know, these things are super important for our communities. We have our there's so many things that these communities have affected us, and we're bringing ourselves out of it, right? You know, kill the Indian, save the man. You know, it hurt our people, and I'm a product of that hurt. You know, these alcohol addictions that are passed down through generations. You know, it's nobody's fault. It's nobody's fault. You know, it doesn't do any good to put blame on somebody. Just realize the problem and just try to make it better. You know, I'm never a person that points fingers. You know, it's his fault or it's their fault or look what he did, look what they did. The fact is that it happened, and how do we get better? And how we get better is through community and through healing and prayer, and just teaching our young ones, man. You know, we really have to set an example. You know, our kids, it's hard to have an identity, right? Everything around them, it's not the old ways. In the old ways, we were a community-based people. You know, in the old days, we would never leave our family, right? You know, now, in the culture we live today, you know, once kids get 17, they can't wait to leave home. They can't wait to go to college in another city. They can't wait to... it's just a different culture, you know. It's not our culture. Or it's not the culture of our ancestors. Not that there's anything wrong with people going to school, man, or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that makes it hard, you know. And it's just, you know, everybody's learning. You know, our people, other people's genetic makeup have been doing this longer than ours. You know, just like the whole diabetes thing. And I know that's weird to bring up, but, you know, a lot of people with indigenous blood get diabetes. Why? Is because we haven't been eating sugar for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's new to us, right? So our body don't really know what to do with it. So that's why in Native American populations, diabetes runs through us, man. I mean, obviously eating bad habits and stuff like that, but it's in our DNA to not, you know, we haven't been processing these kind of foods for hundreds and hundreds of years. We haven't been giving our children away or seeing them leave. It's just, you know. So we really have to show our kids that, set an example, show them our culture, show them how beautiful it is, so they can be appreciative of their ancestors. Maybe show them their language, just because they already have a lot on their plate, man. You know, especially with this alcohol thing. Like, I don't want to get into that too much, but it's for another podcast. But, you know, we're programmed from birth that alcohol is part of our culture. Like, what? No, it's not. How are we programmed to take in this poison as our culture, right? Oh, I can't wait till I'm 21, my first drink. We're going to have a party. 21st birthday. We're going to get drunk. What? We're going to drink poison? Or we're going to celebrate, right? So ever since a young age, New Year's Eve, everybody gets drunk. Birthday parties, everybody gets drunk. It's on the commercials. Oh, man, you're going to have a drink. The best this and that. Commercials. TV. It's brainwashed, man. And I don't want to get too much into that because I'll start ranting on it. One other thing I wanted to talk about in this podcast was the mascot issue. But I think that deserves a podcast in itself. So I'm going to hold off on that. So we're going to make this one a little bit shorter. I don't know, man. I ramble a lot. I don't even know what time it is here. But again, you know, if there's any advice that I want you to take from anything I said today, is just hope, you know, and honor, and just respect our ancestors. You know, a lot of times when your parents or your grandparents were alcoholics, some people feel ashamed or they look down on them. And man, that is just not healthy, man. I don't look down on nobody. And that'll start a healing for you. You know, you don't want to hold that burden. You don't want to hold, or you don't want to be ashamed of someone's struggle, because you don't know their struggle, right? It's like that saying, you know, you're not in their shoes. You don't know their pain. You don't know how they're not given these coping mechanisms that can help them cope. So a lot of times they turn to alcohol, just like some of our ancestors did when our babies were stolen. Don't look down on these people. They're just damaged at the moment, right? And like anything else, they just need help, man. They need community, and that's kind of just like how I was rambling on about the school thing. Is just, you know, we're a community-based people. You know, we need each other, and you know, when they took our kids, our culture is not that. That wasn't what we were about. You know, just like in European culture, you know, maybe they would do that. Maybe they would go to school somewhere else and be away from their family for years at a time. Even now, like, I don't get it. I'm not judging nobody's culture, or if you send your kids to schools out of state, that's your guys' thing. For me, that's ridiculous. You know, I couldn't even imagine my daughter going to a school. Even, I don't even care if she would get the greatest education. You know, I'm giving her the greatest education. I'm giving her love, and I'm giving her 100% of my being. I'm teaching her how to love. I'm teaching her why we love. I'm teaching her how our family is a unit. You know, you're not going to learn that in no school, and no, you know. And I'm not saying I'm anti-education. Absolutely get your education, because that's how we're going to play this game. You know, we need our future generations becoming educators. We need our future education becoming senators, so we can change some of these laws that are keeping our people down. You know, we absolutely need that. And that's a struggle, man. Like, that's just what we struggle with. Me personally, I would never send off my kids. Obviously, when they're 18, that's their choice. But not really. You know, there's schools in Fresno. But they're all their own human beings. So don't be hard on your ancestors if they made that struggle. And or living, You know, if you have a cousin or uncle or mom or dad that struggle with alcohol and addiction, and maybe they're first generation alcoholics, maybe their parents were alcoholics, and that was passed down as just a coping tool. You know, if you see your parents when they get in fights, or if they're struggling, they're going through something, they're like, oh man, I just need that beer, I need to come home and relax and drink a beer. Our kids see that, you know, and that's ingrained in our head, myself included. Early 20s, man, fighting with somebody or hurting or missing somebody. I need a beer, I need a drink. That's a toxic way of life, toxic thinking. Needs to change. But I'm rambling, and all that's connected. Let me just say that all of that is connected through this era. Every single thing I'm talking about is connected to this era. The loss of community, the loss of the importance of community, the loss of importance of family unit, the loss of just passing down love and passing down the feeling of not being lonely, right? Like when a kid's lonely, their brain automatically starts trying to find things to deal with that. You know, I make sure my babies know every single day that I love them to death and I will do anything for them. And that's what's important, you know. And all of that is because of this era, you know. Early 1900s. The last residential school was closed in 1996. 1996, folks. Not that long ago. So that's crazy to think about, right? That's not that long ago. It wasn't allowed for Native Americans to pray until 1978. That's true. That's real. So there's all these laws, man, that kept Native people down. And but because we are who we are, we made it through it, and we honor that. You know, if some of us dealt with that through the bottle, pray for them. Don't look down on them. You know, give them help. Don't step on them. You know, there's a lot of just people that just can't wait to see someone fail so they can step on them. And I'm not saying that that's today's culture, man, but that's out there, man, and it's disgusting. Man, if I see someone that's failing, man, there's no way I'm going to step on them. I'm going to try to help them up, man. That's what community does. If you see someone struggling with financial, I do what I can. I don't have that much money, but that's what I do. You know, and luckily, you know, I kind of got that way or thought process handed down to me from my pops. You know, he would do that stuff for anybody. So just like anything else, right? My dad did that for people. And what are we talking about? Kids learning stuff, right? I learned that from my dad. Not because he set me down and be like, hey, this is how you're supposed to treat people. No, I learned that because I was with him every day. And I learned that because that's what I saw him do, right? I saw him do things for people. I saw him buy people meals. You know, one of his friends during Thanksgiving one time said he didn't have money to feed his family. So we literally packed up all our groceries from our refrigerator and took them over and gave it to him. You know, that's just the person my dad was, you know. And that's not something that he sat down and taught me through a book or through teachings. You know, I was taught that by watching him do that. And that's why I think it's so important for our kids to stay at home. Just for me. Not putting judgment on nobody. But that's the importance of community, you know. And just how we learn things to be human beings. You know, we forget about that sometimes. We forget, you know, we think that everything that we can learn is learned through books. You know, a lot of it is just learned through being human beings and interacting with our parents and seeing how they're interacting. So, you know, when you see your parents fight, or you see your parents drink, or you see your parents do drugs. I've seen all that. So I fight, and I drank in my early 20s, and so all that stuff's learned. So we got to do better, right? I got to do better. I'm not saying I do all this perfect. Nope. Make mistakes all the time. But I do my best. So I just encourage you all to do the same. Just try, If you fail, just get right back up. And hopefully there'll be a community member there to try to help you out if you need it. So I'm rambling. Thanks for tuning into this one. Our next one is going to be on the mascot. I was supposed to talk about that today, but I'll make that a separate episode, and then we'll get that out next week also. Thanks for checking out my podcast.